Salutations, Legion of Doom. Welcome to Podcast The Storm, socially awkward outcasts, crazy weirdos, all around nerds convene to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, the nerdy co-host, aka the Authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Good evening, all. It's probably going to be a relatively slow one this week.
And I host last time on Wannabe, the brainstorm of pop culture. How's everyone doing tonight?
I am doing fine. Much better than I was doing yesterday for some reason. I had a random bout of suicidal ideation yesterday for no fucking reason at all. I don't even know why.
Hello, Ed Brewer, says yo. Right.
Hello, Ed.
Yeah. Okay. So, I don't really have anything else to really catch up on, so I believe we shall start.
Yep. Let's just jump right into it.
Yeah, so this is one Dalton sent me, I believe, last week, correct?
I think so.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we couldn't cover it simply because we already had last week's was full by the time he sent me this.
Yeah, we were hell bent on finishing up the neurotic response, and we did.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So this is from slashfilm.com. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness repeats Marvel Comics' worst Scarlet Witch mistakes. It's written by Jamie Gerber, published May 17th, 2022.
My tentative response to that is no, and there's nothing wrong with the way they handle her in the comics, generally speaking. Unless you have some. Go ahead.
Well, I at least want to hear I want to at least hear their reasoning before I really pick a side.
Like I said, that's just my tentative response. But based on the title, my short response would be no. But we'll see if her argument can stand up to scrutiny.
Okay. There is a lot of love about Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness. Sam Raimi brought something really unique to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and those elements were intensified by Danny Elfman's incredible score. Seriously, how fun was that music fight? However, the film has proven divisive, and honestly, I get it.
I agree on all the positive counts here, but quite frankly, I both do and don't understand the divisiveness. Because a large part of the divisiveness is down to the marketing and where they said they were going to focus versus where they actually did focus. That being said, where the marketing implied they were going and where the focus of the press junkets implied they were focusing was on multiverse, cameos. And I have always maintained, and you can go back through these podcasts and check it if you don't believe me, that the most interesting part of the term multiverse of madness is the of madness part, i.e. the part that evokes H.P. Lovecraft and John Carpenter and would be best served by Sam Raimi bringing his sort of Lovecraft fanboyism to the fore and so on and so forth. So I think it's a good thing that Multiverse of Madness was not Cameo the movie, and was not focused on multiverse. I'm glad that it was a Lovecraftian horror comedy for kids in the style of like the first Pirates of the Caribbean or something, um, along those lines. That being said, I can understand why some people were annoyed by that because the marketing was bullshit, and it's what made me afraid of the movie before I even saw it because I was too worried that they were going to ignore all the Doctor Strange stuff in favor of my multiverse.
Mhm.
Um, that being said, there are also some other criticisms that the movie has been getting, which I don't fucking get at all. And um, we've covered at least one person ostensibly on our side's reaction to the movie, and yeah, to that extent, the divisiveness is not warranted because a lot of people just don't seem to be paying attention to the actual movie. Moving on.
Yep. Despite how much I enjoyed parts of this movie, I still left the theater with an overwhelming feeling of disappointment. It's not because the film made Wanda a villain, or even the fact that it all but ignores the brilliant character work laid out in WandaVision.
No, it does not. The entire okay. This is the thing about WandaVision, because there is a split among reactions to WandaVision. There is the reaction of people who, in my opinion, were paying attention to what was going on in WandaVision, and there are people who ignore the actual content of WandaVision and pay more attention to how it was framed. And this I do not find defensible. The people who paid more attention to the content rather than the framing saw her as more of a villain than the show implied, and therefore wanted her to be treated as a villain more in the movie. And she was, because she had taken over a small town and brainwashed them and then distorted reality around them to turn reality into a sitcom using complex hex magic. So, quite frankly, no, her character work, if you paid attention to it in WandaVision, was setting up her being a villain because she was not mentally okay at the end of WandaVision. She gained some closure with the alternate construct Mind Stone Vision, and by letting her kids, fade into non-existence to free the town, and that's good for her. But then she sat in a room for, according to the timeline of the MCU, 18 months with the freaking Darkhold. And, as I explained to Gary in the two previous podcasts, you cannot sit in a room with the Darkhold and come out sane for that long. Strange, you could make an argument for because he just used it once and only for a few minutes. But Wanda sat alone in a room for 18 months with the freaking thing, with it whispering to her, and because she was already teetering on the edge of villainy, and because she had just barely gotten enough closure to move on with her life, the Darkhold found fertile ground because her mind was barely holding itself together to begin with, and then along comes the Darkhold whispering to her. So no, if you pay attention to the content of WandaVision, then she was definitely a villain at the end of WandaVision. The only way you can justify in your own head that she was not the villain at the end of WandaVision is if you pay more attention to the way WandaVision was framed than the actual content of WandaVision, which, in my opinion, is philosophically untenable. Because the framing did not line up with the content at all. Moving on. Unless Brainstormer left the room.
No, I'm still here. I was cleaning my glasses.
Okay, sorry.
Um, Yeah. Okay. But still clean my glasses here. Just
Yeah.
there we go. There we go. Though that's certainly there. In this case, my frustration with the MCU is how closely it chose to stick to the source material.
You do realize that you have a very high burden of proof for yourself now, because
I,
in no
again, I am willing to hear them out.
yeah, okay, yes, I am willing to hear them out as well. I'm just pointing out that generally speaking, if your complaint is, well, it didn't stick close, stuck too close to the source material, you have to do a lot of work to not be disregarded out of hand. Because sticking close to the source material is usually a good thing. And I have a strong suspicion, I could be wrong, but my suspicion is that this person is going to make all sorts of abstract moral and feminist arguments to explain why the source material was somehow immoral, rather than make an actual qualitative argument as to how it veering away from the source material could have been written better. Which, yeah. And again, I hope I'm wrong, and may I be struck by lightning when I am wrong. But nevertheless, I have a strong suspicion that this is going to be, you can't frame her as a villain obsessed with having her children, because that implies that women be crazy, and you can't imply that women be crazy because it's immoral, derp.
Shall we?
Yeah, moving on.
Being used as a plot device with little agency is nothing new from Wanda Maximoff. The hero has had a complicated comics history for decades. It could have handled a heel turn from Scarlet Witch had it felt earned.
But okay,
It did.
that is
It was earned.
that is the single stupidest possible argument you could make with this. Okay, in case anyone doesn't know, Wanda Maximoff has god tier reality warping abilities in the comics. There is literally no one in reality, save for maybe the Living Tribunal or maybe the One of All himself, who can take agency away from her, because her will can literally reshape reality. There is no conceivable way you could limit her agency. The fact that her agency is often directed by the things that happen to her does not make her a victim. What it makes her is a person subject to the cause and effect upgrade, i.e., when bad things happen to her, her powers get the better of her, and her will, the will that had been previously established to be able to warp reality on a whim, reshapes reality. In fact, given that she is a god tier reality bender, you could make the argument that she has more agency than literally anyone who has less reality warping powers than her. Because if reality itself buckles to your will, that is maximum agency. The only way you could have more agency than a god tier reality bender is if you literally could just create stuff from scratch rather than just warping it. And Wanda can occasionally do that too. And as Agatha explains in the MCU, that is one of the upshots for chaos magic, is she can create things. She describes the Scarlet Witch as, quote, a being capable of spontaneous creation. So in the context of the MCU, at least, she is that powerful. She has, to say that Wanda Maximoff has no agency is to say that no one in the Marvel Universe has agency. If reality itself bends to your will, that is maximum agency. That is maximum ability to have your will done in relation to the external world, because she can warp the external world to her liking. That's maximum agency. That is not in any way the absence of agency. You twit. Moving on.
Right. What I find to be a true letdown is watching a comics character who was seemingly reinvented with WandaVision once again reduced to the trope of a hysterical woman who can't handle her power and goes off the deep end because motherhood.
Okay, once again, he doesn't just go off the deep end because motherhood, even though that is an incredibly sympathetic cause for villainy. Personal loss is a very, very um sympathetic cause for villainy or anti-heroism. She goes off the deep end because she sat in a room with the Darkhold for 18 months, which has a power scale on the level of the Death Note from Death Note, the One Ring from Lord of the Rings, and the freaking Necronomicon Ex Mortis. No person is going to be sane after 18 months of that. But as it happens, the grief demonstrated in WandaVision, which does not change her arc in any meaningful way, it just adds more context to it, gave the Darkhold a fertile ground. Because the Darkhold is basically the devil on Wanda's shoulder. When Wanda came to when Wanda came into that cabin and opened that freaking book, it started whispering to her. It started saying things along the lines of, "You can have it all back, Wanda. Here, let me show you your kids, Wanda. Let me show you that literally every other universe has these children, Wanda. Your universe is the odd one out. In every other universe, they're real. They're not some sort of schizophrenic delusion you conjured through magic. They're real in every other universe. Want to summon up some demons so you can get them? That's what the Darkhold does. It takes whatever personal darknesses you have, whatever character flaws you have, and puts pressure on those flaws like a lumberjack splitting a piece of wood with a wedge, basically. That's what the Darkhold does. And given that in this context, it had 18 months to play with her, it had 18 months to whisper to her and be the devil on her shoulder. And she also was in an extremely psychologically vulnerable place because she had just gotten off the cycle of grief. When you've just finished a cycle of grief, you are very, very vulnerable. It's why whenever a alcoholic or a drug addict um just became sober, they're watched more closely in the anonymous programs, because when the wound is still fresh, for lack of a better word, you're more prone for relapsing. And if a negative influence, like, say, a book that literally contains all the dark magic possible in a given universe, comes along, and it's literally like the equivalent of somebody who was on drugs, getting off of drugs, and then a drug dealer comes along and offers you more drugs. She should have been under psychological um, observation after the events of Westview. And if the feminist moralizing of we can't have a man help a woman get through her grief because that would be misogynistic wasn't there, and Doctor Strange was able to help her, she probably would have been under observation and certainly fucking away from the Darkhold. But because she wasn't, she got just enough closure, just enough, of her mental stability back to release the people of Westview. And then along comes the Darkhold. And 18 months later, of course she's warped beyond all reckoning. But as it happens, people's emotions are always a fertile ground for character flaws or character mistakes. It doesn't have to just be a woman who is very attached to her children. It can be literally any loved one. You know, and just for the record, all those people who go, well, this would never happen to a male character. I'm going to call you on your bullshit, because if you've seen the Joker movie, their arcs are very similar. The only difference being Wanda has reality warping fuck off powers, whereas the Joker does not have reality warping fuck off powers. Um, but yes, this happens to male characters too. The only difference is we as the audience generally care more when it happens to a female character because motherhood is is on in every culture in the world seen as a universal moral good. Women's motherhood is considered almost sacred. Moving on.
Mhm. While Disney Plus show delved deeply into Wanda's trauma and grief, her portrayal in Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness feels paper thin. Hand wave and blame the influence of Dark World all you want, but the truth is the idea has grown stale. Yes, the film draws
Um,
heavily from comics lore, but, and I say this as a huge comics fan, that's not always a good thing.
um, unless you're gonna make some kind of bullshit moral argument, yes, it is. And also, you can't just ignore the influence of the Darkhold as though that's not a thing in universe. That's like blaming Gollum's portrayal in the Lord of the Rings and saying something to the effect of, "You can blame the influence of the ring all you want." Like, but in universe, that is a necessary factor. Like in the universe of Lord of the Rings, being exposed to the ring does warp you. And in the MCU and the Marvel Comics lore, the Darkhold does warp you, especially when your powers, like in the case of Wanda, come from the guy who freaking wrote and also possesses the Darkhold. Like it's a living extension of Cthon. Don't be fucking acting like the in-universe logic all of a sudden doesn't matter because morality. Well, if the universe in question gives you the obvious out of the Darkhold was acting as the devil on her shoulder for 18 months, you can't just hand wave that away in the comics or in the fucking MCU either. Moving on.
Hmm. Um, Scarlet Witch has been failed repeatedly by comics over the years, and rather than update source material, it hasn't necessarily aged well. The newest Doctor Strange movie simply doubles down on those mistakes.
Because they're not mistakes unless you're looking at it from a very narrow moralistic perspective. Like you're basically doing the equivalent of a fundamentalist evangelical looking at this character and saying, "Well, she's an interesting character and all, but the fact that she's a witch makes it impossible for me to like her because witchcraft is bad according to the Bible." That's what you're doing. That is the to the letter exactly what you're doing. You're just doing it from the other end. In this case, swap fundamentalist evangelical Christianity for feminism. That's all you've done. And it's still a moralistic, whiny bullshit argument. It's still Puritanism. It's still bullshit. She is a witch character, so a fundamentalist evangelical Christian can be told to fuck off for not liking her because she's a witch, and she is a damaged woman with sympathetic maternal motives. So feminism can be told to fuck off in this instance. And incidentally, any argument that you make with regards to Wanda Maximoff's insanity can be just as easily applied to DC's The Spectre, especially during the Day of Vengeance storyline. So I don't want to fucking hear this. It's misogynistic because you wouldn't do it to a male character bullshit. They've done it to the Spectre for decades, and he's even less stable and sympathetic than she is because she at least has the maternal, feminine, emotional angle to play off of. The Spectre, when he goes insane, does it because he just doesn't have a human anchor and decides he needs to balance the universe. So, if anything, Wanda is actually treated more sympathetically than the Spectre. So, again, I don't want to hear it.
Moving forward.
Moving forward.
So there's another part here, hero or villain. Many of Scarlet Witch's stories are a product of their time, obviously comics from previous decades. even as late as the early aughts, and read quite differently in 2022 than they did at the time they were published. My issue isn't with Wanda becoming Marvel Comics' big bad. I love seeing complex female villains. It's the fact that she's constantly manipulated, has little to no agency even in the stories that supposedly center on her, and that motherhood
Oh,
is generally the driving force behind her ability at defense.
okay. Once a fucking again, for the record, she is a reality bender who can warp observable physical empirical reality out of joint at her will. There is literally no way in any universe, apart from literally being a monotheistic deity, that she could have any more agency over the world than she does. She can warp reality on a whim, up to and including killing or suppressing the powers of entire peoples, as she did in House of M, or literally rewriting the course of reality and creating life from scratch, as she did with her children. So I don't want to hear this she had no agency bullshit. Fuck you, she's a reality bender, therefore her agency is maximum agency. A a person whose agency is so effective that she can literally warp empirical physical reality out of joint on a whim has all of the agency. Fuck you. Moving on. Brainstormer. Did you step away again? I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I went to get some water and then I came back and I tried saying some things and uh,
You were muted?
yeah, I totally forgot I muted myself.
Okay, yes. Well, yeah, there's that.
So
Moving on.
my bad. My bad. Okay, yeah. We see one is we wreck plenty of havoc. Wreak plenty of havoc
Yeah.
in the comics, but are rarely given any real insight into her state of mind. Hello, Dragon Turtle.
Hello, Dragon Turtle, how are you? They're accusing a woman who can literally bend reality at her will of having no agency because reasons.
Mhm. Uh, yeah, I don't have anything to say to the last part I just read, so
Yeah, moving on.
Snow Witch has had a rough time throughout her Marvel Comics history. Created in 1964 by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, Wanda Maximoff debuted in X-Men #4, much like her introduction in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Scarlet Witch began her comics journey as a villain. She and her brother Pietro were members of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, though Wanda was really only fighting for Magneto because she felt she owed her life to him. However, it didn't take long before both Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver became bona fide Avengers. Scarlet Witch would remain a hero for quite some time until Marvel decided she wasn't.
What you just confirmed, and what I am going to reiterate for you, is going to make your entire argument about MCU's Wanda's journey really, really, really redundant. Because if you've actually watched all of Wanda's appearances in the MCU, you know she's always teetering between hero and villain. She's always teetering between hero and villain. There's a really great summary video done by a guy by the name of BHL Hudson, that goes through Wanda's entire arc before Multiverse of Madness. And if you look at her arc in its entirety, in that summary video, you can see she's always teetering on the edge of, between the far field of anti-hero and the beginnings of villain. The only thing that changes in WandaVision is she has had her Joker-style one bad day and creates the Hex in Westview out of grief and pain and derp. And while she's able to put that grief aside and let people live, because, she doesn't enjoy the thought of consciously torturing people for the rest of their lives, and that's the only difference is Wanda, for 90% of the events of WandaVision, doesn't know she's torturing people. And then when she becomes made aware of the fact that she's torturing people by Agatha Harkness, she tries to stop torturing people and only stops herself from stopping long enough to deal with the fact that her kids and her constructed Mind Stone version of Vision will be erased as a result of undoing the hex. And she does manage to do that. But just because she comes to terms with the fact of I can't torture people to get what I want, no matter how good it feels, doesn't mean that she isn't still an emotional wreck and therefore fertile ground for the Darkhold to come along and start whispering like it do. Moving on.
In a stupid way, Dragon Turtle. In a stupid way.
Yeah. Again, the thing that absolutely breaks my brain about this argument is you're asserting that this woman who can bend empirical reality to her will, literally, has no agency. And I'm like, that the meaning of the term agency is your own thoughts, opinions, and beliefs having an impact on empirical reality, right? That's almost a literal definition of the term agency. The ability to have an impact on reality or external reality with your thoughts, opinions, and desires. And you're saying that this woman has no agency while she is a reality bending witch who can literally enforce her agency on reality at the freaking fundamental level. Derp. Derp, I say. Moving on.
One has been many things throughout her existence, and her history has been retconned enough times to make your head hurt. I mean, that's every comic book character.
This is just how the game is played with regards to comics. Sorry.
She has played both hero and villain, though her time as the former has definitely outweighed her experience as the latter. Still, Wanda rarely had any semblance of control over her own life, whether she is possessed by Catan, manipulated by Immortus, or tricked by Dr. Doom. The Scarlet Witch's worst actions are pretty much never her fault.
Okay, you are like there's apologetics and then there's this kind of shit. She literally has the power to warp reality at her will. There is no conceivable way she could have more agency than this. None. Maybe Wanda should take some responsibility for her own thoughts and emotions and develop this thing we call self-awareness, because that appears to be your only argument. Your only argument is because she doesn't understand herself well enough, she's capable of being tricked by Mephisto, Cthulhu, Doctor Doom, whomever. And thus, I must ask, should we not perhaps put it on Wanda to become self-aware enough that she understands herself and therefore is less liable to be tricked, especially when you consider that her emotional whims can warp existence on a fundamental level. She can just decide for the lulz that like 99.9% of all mutants either don't exist at all, thereby unwriting them from history, or are suppressed and never develop mutant powers. which outside the context of a superhuman, scale here, that means that if we were talking about just normal human beings rather than people with extraordinary, superhuman powers and whatnot, that means that if she felt like it, she could literally lobotomize the entire planet. She could just decide that people who have, fine motor control just don't have that anymore. That's the equivalent of what she's doing to mutants. If you're born with an innate ability and someone can just decide to switch that innate ability off and rewrite your entire personal history in a separate universe, that is a fuck of a lot of power when you consider, like for example, let's say that instead of saying no more mutants, she said no more musicians, which means every person with a musical talent on the face of the planet got basically a lobotomy and their entire personal history. That's the level of shit she's done in the comics before. So I don't want to hear it. She can literally rewrite reality on a whim based on her nothing but her emotions. So if anything, this implies we should impute upon Wanda the necessity to understand her own emotions, because as per the usual Stanley razor, with great power comes great responsibility. And if your emotions have the power to rewrite reality, then you best understand and control your freaking emotions, you bitch. That is how that Stanley's razor plays out in this instance. If your emotions can rewrite and fuck up the universe, you probably should develop some kind of control and administration over your emotions. Moving on.
Alright. Who is Wanda? Star Wars' history is confusing and her origin has been rewritten quite a few times. Again, that's every comic book character.
Yeah.
Likely due in large part to the bad blood between Marvel and Fox, it was revealed years ago that not only was Magneto not her father, but that Wanda wasn't actually a mutant. Both of these things have been central to the character for decades, though you could argue that Magneto being her dad was a retcon in the first place.
Yes, yes, you could, and I would. And quite frankly, given that her powers are more energy based and about manipulation of baseline reality than any of the other like stereotypical mutant abilities, having her be more of a witch than a mutant, or basically a person whose witchcraft is amplified by her mutant abilities, makes a hell of a lot more sense than her being a mutant. But anyway, moving on.
Yeah. Wanda's power set is perplexing too. What began as hex powers or the ability to alter probabilities was eventually combined with a proficiency in magic, which later led to full-on reality warping, making Wanda one of the most powerful beings in Marvel Comics. While even more retcons have explained these power-ups, Wanda has often struggled with her tremendous abilities. The power of the portrayal of her mental health has been flawed, to say the least.
No, no, it is not, because no one, for whatever reason, has allowed Wanda to own up to the fact that since her emotions can, on a whim, rewrite reality, she therefore needs to get control. Like this was handled so much fucking better in Glenn Arakami's Teen Titans with Raven, because she knows that she has to keep her emotions in check on the grounds that her emotions leads to, in Raven's case, large, discharges of dark magical energy. Um, so she takes responsibility for this power and gets fucking control of it by suppressing her emotions using stoicism and meditation and yada da 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 da. Why has no one ever told Wanda to do that? Why has no one ever done that for Wanda? Why has no one ever said, Wanda, your emotions can literally warp reality on a whim, so you have to get control of them? I'm gonna hazard a guess and say because, according to a lot of writers, especially modern day ones, that would be misogynistic to tell a woman to control her emotions. Never mind that there's a fundamental practical reason for her to do so, and why she would want to do so, assuming that she cares about any part of reality, you know, like her friends, her family, so on and so forth. Like, there are so many things that she cares about in the baseline reality that I would imagine she wouldn't want to just erase on a whim. So you'd think she would be ready, willing, and able to get fucking control over herself. But no, because she's a woman, we can't ever tell her your emotions are dangerous to literally all of reality, so get them under fucking control. Never mind that other female characters in other universes, Raven for the example, have no problem doing this of their own volition, but it's different because it's Wanda, because feminist icon derp, somehow.
Mhm.
Moving on.
Wanda's power set. Oh, I read that. Da, 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 da. I'm sure those writing Wanda Maxwell throughout her history had no intention of marring her stories or mirroring.
I Either could work depending on the structure of the sentence, so I don't know.
Well, it's Miring.
I think it's marring, or yeah.
Right? Marring her stories in misogyny. In fact, scribes like Steve Englehart had fought for Wanda to be so much more. He told the Comics Journal, "When I took over Avengers, I was told that Wanda was supposed to do one hex and then be too tired to keep going. I thought to myself, she's a damn Avenger, isn't she? And they deliberately set out to make her stronger. It could be that decision drove all my strong women afterward. She got to be very strong, and at the same time, she was always very loving toward Vision. She and he were the linchpins of a lot of my Avengers, uh, the ones we followed while everyone else had more short-lived arcs, and they got married and then had kids. The greatest Marvel couple." Eh,
Yeah, no, I have no objections to anything that Steve Englehart said. Steve Englehart was an amazing writer of comics, and he also wrote one of my favorite Doctor Strange stories, or arcs, or runs rather, of Strange. So yeah, I can't fault him for any of what he just said. That being said, though, given that writers like Steve Englehart made Wanda more powerful, as we know, Stanley's razor applies here. With great power comes what again? Great responsibility. Hence the question of why we can enforce that rule when it comes to every other fucking character in the Marvel Universe, but we can't enforce it with Wanda for some reason. Moving on.
Wanda's descent into madness. Of course, Englehart's work was undone not long after he left West Coast Avengers. Vision was destroyed and rebuilt into an unrecognizable version of himself, and it turned out Wanda had willed Billy and Tommy into existence. This could cause the Scarlet Witch to snap on her teammates, though, as it later turns out, she had no real control, as many of these events were shown to be orchestrated by Immortus.
Okay. My I'm both frustrated and confused in this particular instance because that to me does not strike me as a undoing of her arc. That strikes me as a furthering of her arc, i.e., they got the happy ending. Now let's see what else we can do with it from a dramatic perspective. And given that one of the partners of this power couple in comics is an android, it does raise the question: how the fuck did they have kids? And given that the other partner in this particular duo is a reality warping witch, it sort of follows that them being created from magic follows. So I don't see this as an attempt to undo what Steve Englehart did. I see this as an attempt to further and derive interesting and compelling stories from that arc, and it does. Moving on.
Right. Well, Dredge also some things. Depends how powerful was the hex. If it's like Cyclops using his eye beams once at normal power, then that would be one thing. But if it's like Mega Megami, where that one shot is a nuke, then using that multiple times on command would be broken. I think he's talking about the Steve Eaglehart thing.
I don't know. I I don't understand. I don't understand the point you're trying to make there, Dragon Turtle. Because her probability manipulation that she gets from being a mutant, being buttressed by her skill in chaos magic is has always been kind of broken. I mean, sure, but there's no reason why you can't tell interesting stories with a character who can do that, who gets good enough to do that on a whim.
Okay, author said that she getting one hex and being too tired was bad. I was saying it depended on how powerful that hex was. I mean,
I mean, sure, but a character who can only do a useful thing once in a battle situation, um, unless we're talking like rewriting the entire universe once a day or something, like I I think that's I think that's I think that genuinely would make her a less compelling character. I think Steve Englehart was in the right to go, hang on, why can't she do that more often? Um, that being said, I'm also fine with what they chose to do with that and make it um by making it a power that has consequences, because the Marvel standard is Stanley's razor, which is with great power comes great responsibility. So by making her more powerful, you also up her standard of responsibility, therefore making her basically Marvel's equivalent to a character like the Spectre, who can warp reality on a whim when he feels like it. Um, and that's my main issue with claiming that Wanda using her reality warping powers is somehow misogynistic. Never mind that the Spectre has been doing the same thing for decades and he is male. So, yeah,
moving forward.
moving forward. Yeah.
Okay, Wanda's greatest turn as a villain is inaugually from Avengers disassembled into House of M. It's been close to 20 years since Brian Michael Bendis began the story. The former has art from David Finch, and the latter from Oliver Copio, and Scarlet Witch has barely escaped its shadow. Despite the fact that Wanda had played the villain multiple times before, her major powers upgrade as well as her rapidly deteriorating mental state kind of come out of nowhere.
Um, no, not really. It's a character motivated thing. It's it's a description of how her powers have grown mixed with how her mental state has deteriorated, which all of these can be explained in character related shit. So no, it doesn't come out of nowhere. It's the logical extension of her character journey and her power growth mixed together.
You know,
Yep.
this turn is the result of events that happened more than a decade earlier, and there hadn't been much exploration of that trauma since. Janet, aka Wasp, mentions the kids, and Wanda loses it immediately. Unresolved.
Like anyone would if they realized they had kids they didn't remember all of a sudden.
I haven't read that. I haven't read that story. So, to be fair, I
Yeah.
haven't really touched a lot of modern, so to speak, like last 20 or so years of comics.
Yeah.
In terms of like big two.
Well, that, and of course it is, Bendis. So, Bendis.
I'd argue 20 years ago he was good.
I mean, sure, but it's one of those like there have been good Mark Waid stories, and even his run of Doctor Strange wasn't too bad. But like having seen what he's become now, it becomes hard to even enjoy the old stories that he did well.
That's
Um.
pretty good. But okay.
Anyway, moving on.
Yeah. House of M is considered by many to be a core Scarlet Witch tale, but it's mostly a Wolverine story. One is little more than a plot device on which everything can be blamed in both the Avengers arc and major Marvel events.
Okay, fuck you. You didn't pay attention. They do not blame her. The entire arc is about saving her. Like that. That's all they're striving to do throughout the entire story is to save her, to wake her up, and to have her put the universe back to rights. Like no, if they treated her as a if they treated her as the problem, you might have a point, but they treat her as someone who made a mistake and needs to be saved. But somehow, because of batshit fucking ideology, being sympathetic to a character who can literally rewrite reality and needing to save them is now misogynistic because you can't say women need to be saved. They must always have entire power over their decisions. But you also can't say that they're an irredeemable villain because they have to be sympathetic because otherwise you're slandering the good name of all women. This is the limbo bar you've set up for yourself. We can't make her we can't have people actually be sympathetic to her because that would imply saving her, and we can't have women be saved. But we also can't have a woman be an irredeemable villain because she has to be sympathetic. Do you not see how those two things are very hard to do simultaneously and live up to your standards? God damn it.
Right,
Moving on.
before Giant Troll. To be fair, I think Hawkeye blamed her, though she might have also killed him. Don't remember completely.
Yeah, I vaguely remember Hawkeye blaming her, but he was framed as being in the wrong for that. So like he was framed as being the backwards idiot for blaming her. So again, she was the person that everyone set out to save.
Anyway, moving forward, or
Yep.
Wanda makes the entire world, and not only is she barely in the story, but it's revealed her brother Pietro was the one pulling her strings all along. Don't be wrong, I think House of M is an amazing read. It just isn't really about Wanda at all. Once again, she is barely a supporting character in a narrative that hinges on her actions.
Uh Again, no, you didn't pay attention. She is the sympathetic character in that entire story. Everyone's actions revolve around trying to save her from herself, basically. Moving on.
What we see versus what we get. I'm not suggesting that the inexorable pull of grief couldn't chip away at one's sanity. What I am saying is that Wanda's twist doesn't feel earned in chaos, the main arc of Avengers Disassembled, any more than it does in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Wanda had suffered so much in the comics, having lost her husband and her children. On top of that, being possessed multiple times and having your mind constantly manipulated by villains would take its toll. Not to mention, Wanda's memories of her kids were totally wiped by Agatha Harkness.
Yes, you literally just explained why you're wrong in this instance. You you claimed that this wasn't set up, and then you explained exactly how it was set up. I,
No, I think they're saying not set up in the MCU properly, which I think that could be argued.
I mean, maybe. The only reason it wasn't set up well enough in WandaVision is because Jack Schaefer refused to become familiar with the comics, and also she wanted Wanda to be overly. She wanted Wanda to do bad things and still be sympathetic for it. It's the stupid line from Monica Rambeau that really fucks everything over. They'll never know what you sacrificed for them thing. If if WandaVision had ended correctly and Monica and company chased Wanda like Thaddeus Ross chases the Hulk, or like Commissioner Gordon chases Batman at the end of The Dark Knight, that would have that would have fixed this entire rigmarole. But because Jack Schaefer was such a feminist bitch that she couldn't follow through on the implications of her own goddamn story, the framing of WandaVision ran counter to the content of WandaVision. All Sam Raimi and Michael Waldron did was side with the content over the framing, which, in my opinion, was the correct choice anyway, because the framing did not follow from the content. And content is more important than framing. I'm sorry. I know I just gave you know I know I just gave a bunch of film theorists a cold sweat, modern day academic film theorist a cold sweat, because I just implied that the diegetic in universe logic trumps the external implications, but I'm sticking by it. The diegetic in universe logic trumps the external moralistic implications. If you can't tell your moral fuckwittery using the content of the story, either change the content of the story or drop the fucking moralistic woo. Frankly, I'd prefer the second rather than the first, but do something that makes the content and the framing work together if you can't be arsed to have them flow naturally from each other. Moving on.
On his villainous turn in the new Doctor Strange movie is even more egregious considering the way WandaVision left things. Perhaps if we'd had another movie or show in which Marvel had chosen to explore Wanda's mindset further, rather than going straight from the Disney Plus series into the new film, the story would have had room to breathe.
Okay, fuck you. Do you not see the end scene, the post-credit scene of WandaVision, where she's sitting there with the Darkhold? That was your indicator of, oh shit, things are about to get real. And given that there are 18 months between the events of WandaVision, including the post-credit scene, and the events of Doctor Strange 2, that means she sat there with the Darkhold, which is basically the One Ring of the Marvel Universe, for 18 months while it whispered to her, and she was psychologically vulnerable because she had just barely gotten over her grief and was now being forced to slip up and relapse by virtue of the Darkhold, because the Darkhold was a negative influence, and it got to her just just at the right time for it and the wrong time for everyone else in the universe. I.e., it's like somebody having a drug bender, going to, Drug Addicts Anonymous or whatever, and then immediately coming out of their first Drug Addicts Anonymous meeting and being offered drugs by a drug dealer, a very, very persuasive drug dealer. And even if she didn't say yes to that on the first day, if she then has to live with that metaphorical drug dealer for 18 months, no no drug addict is going to be able to say no to that after being propositioned 18 months in a row. repeatedly.
Mhm.
That's all that happened there. She had just enough composure to make the right choice at the end of WandaVision, and then the Darkhold was able to use her vulnerable state of having just come to the right conclusion to push her back into the darkness, which was made even easier by the fact that her powers come from Chthon to begin with, or at least are amplified by Chthon's dark magic to begin with. She is literally the living avatar of Chthon and just didn't know it. And then she went a reading the Darkhold, and and it, Chthon basically looked at that and went, "Welcome home, Wanda, my child. Let me use you as I've always intended to use you." Which is why she's the prophesied Scarlet Witch and has the altar to her in Castle Darkhold, because this is what Chthon always intended to do, and he's doing it. Moving on. Sorry.
Wanda made the decision to release the town of Westview. She not only chose to give up Vision as well as Billy and Tommy. We do see her with the Darkhold at the end of the series, and it seems as though she was quite alone for a while, or was alone for quite a while. So no one could have checked up on her. However, if WandaVision made me believe the MCU was capable of elevating the source material, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness caused me to wonder if any of this so-called interconnected storytelling even matters.
Okay. Here is your problem, love. You consider WandaVision to be an elevation of the source material for nothing but moral reasons. Nothing but moral reasons. When in actuality, all it does is give more context to the source material. It allows you to see things from Wanda's perspective, but that does not mean that her perspective is therefore sacrosanct and flawless. Someone can do villainous things for the right reason, but that doesn't stop them from doing those villainous things or having a warped perspective. Every evil person throughout history, barring extreme neurological exceptions to the rule, believed that they were in the right while they were doing it. And most villains in real life have a background ludicrously over sampled with trauma. Trauma is how you create a villain in real life. It's how you cause cluster B personality disorders. It's how you cause sociopathy and psychopathy. You take a child and you beat the living fuck out of them when they're young so that they never develop a neurotypical standard for empathy. That is how you create a villain. And that is exactly the kind of shit that happened to Wanda in the events of WandaVision. Yes, she was able to have one moment of clarity where she made the correct choice to release the people of Westview and give up her children momentarily. But then that vulnerable child, that vulnerable person who just got over her grief, was told, actually, your grief was perfectly justified, and actually, in the grand calculus of the multiverse, you're the odd one out because you're the only Wanda who doesn't have her kids. Here, I can take you to your kids if you just summon up these demons and kill this one child. 18 months later, and boom, here we are. Moving on.
Okay. Can Wanda be saved? I don't believe the only women can be trusted with our own stories, but it is telling that WandaVision had a diverse writer's room largely populated by women. Oh yeah, real diverse. I know the screenplay for Multiverse of Madness wasn't written in a vacuum, and I really enjoyed screenwriter Michael Waldron's work on Loki. This is not meant to disparage the movie, because it obviously has great moments as well. However, while WandaVision brought me to tears, the Doctor Strange sequel didn't resonate with me on an emotional level. Plus, don't even get me started on how the movie treated another one of my favorite female characters, America Chavez. All made her an actually likable and tolerable character, not
Yeah, it fixed her character, thanks, but yeah.
and we've talked about like Michael Waldron before. He, The real issue is more so lack of experience in the genre that Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is in.
Well, I don't even think it's the genre necessarily. I think it's just the scale. He went from making one very good episode of a half an hour animated comedy show to making an entire series of prestige television with Loki to making a big budget blockbuster sequel in a overarching franchise. That's a hell of an ask to ask for anyone with minimal writing experience to do. And while I do genuinely believe Michael Waldron is talented, talent only gets you so far, and he was asked to go from one half an hour episode to 8 hour long episodes of prestige television to a 2 hour blockbuster sequel in an overarching franchise. I don't even think young Neil Gaiman could have pulled something like that off. And we all know how highly I think of young Neil Gaiman.
Um, you know,
That was something else I wanted to say in relation to her. Um, oh yeah, okay. Here's the thing about Wanda's arc. I doubt very much that any of us think that Wanda's actually dead. She obviously teleported out using using that last blast of red chaos magic. She obviously, I don't know, went to go find Agatha and to study with her. So we'll see her again in Agatha House of Harkness, or um she obviously like wiped her own memory, or she did something at the end of Multiverse of Madness that didn't involve letting herself be crushed to death by the remains of Castle Darkhold. I very much doubt that her arc is done. What this showed is a downturn for her character, which she will then have to build back up from and have to redeem herself from. Just like at the end of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness for Doctor Strange, he had to take on some of the Darkhold's darkness in order to save America and dreamwalk into his parallel universe corpse and da 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 da. So we're obviously going to have to see him redeem himself, probably by being purified by the Vishanti, so that he can then use that third eye that he got from reading the Darkhold to channel the Vishanti's power rather than Chthon's, and therefore he can actually become Sorcerer Supreme. That's probably the route we're going somewhere. But either way, both characters, both the main heroic character, Doctor Strange, and the villain Scarlet Witch, are in the middle of their arcs. Neither of them is dead. And if it does turn out that she's actually dead, and that last glint of red magic meant nothing, I'm gonna be pissed. But yeah, I'll be pissed right along with everyone else. But I very much doubt that she's dead. And anyone who thinks that she is dead clearly doesn't know about comic book media very much. She's going to have to redeem herself, and she's going to have to probably find some other way that doesn't involve reading the freaking Darkhold to learn about how to master her powers, which probably is going to involve her meeting up with Agatha in the events of Agatha House of Harkness, if the writers know what they're doing anyway. Moving on.
I can handle Wanda as a villain, but a one-note villain. How did she reach this point? Sure, she's seen using the Darkhold, but no way indicates she's going on a killing spree in which she indiscriminately murders heroes, all in service of sacrificing not only a child for her own happiness, but also another version of herself.
Um, did they justified this in the movie? Like her rationale was, she described her rationale several times. She even threw Doctor Strange's own in the grand calculus of the multiverse back in his face when he questioned her on it. Like, she thinks that America Chavez is dangerous and she's actually doing everyone a favor. She also thinks that all she wants is the power to be with her kids, so everyone else is being unreasonable by not giving in to her. Like, this was explained in character. And anything else can be explained by she sat in a room alone with the Darkhold for 18 months. Bearing in mind that Doctor Strange used it for a few minutes one time and is already sprouting a fucking third eye. So based on that level of corruption that we've seen demonstrated from the Darkhold, yeah, it, one use of it means Doctor Strange sprouts a third eye. So 18 months of using the thing probably is going to break her pretty good, especially considering that she wasn't fully okay at the end of WandaVision, no matter how it's framed.
Moving on.
Moving on.
Also, it's worth noting that Billy and Tommy are safe and content in these other universes. Of course, Wanda misses them more than a lost limb, but we're given very little insight into her motivations. It's fun watching her kill every member of the Illuminati while barely breaking a sweat, as long as I don't think too deeply about why she's doing it. Forbid that a mother wants
to be with her children.
Yeah, like would literally do some of the most horrendous shit.
Like, okay, and once again, before you go, but misogyny because you'd never do that kind of story with a male character. Allow me to once again provide yet another example of the writers doing exactly that kind of thing with a male character, and this one is one that I'm surprised no one has mentioned yet. But I'm gonna blow everyone's mind when I point this out. Anyone seen the first John Wick movie? Remember? It was a car and a dog. A car and a dog brought him back into the fold and put him on a fuck you killing spree. Yes, there was emotional background because it was, his dead wife and da 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 da. But if a gift if a dog and a car given to you by your dead wife is enough justification for John Wick to go all gun happy on some people, then I think a mother grieving the loss of her kids and realizing that her universe is the only universe in which they don't exist, and also having the, devil on the shoulder whispering aspects of the Darkhold in play, and the fact that her powers come from Cthulhu in the first place, um, in play, is enough to drive Wanda after 18 fucking months, mind you. John Wick, this happened to him after one day, a really, really bad day, but one day. Happened to Wanda after 18 months. All things considered, I think she restrained herself pretty darn good.
Moving on.
Yeah, moving on.
Elizabeth Olsen is excellent as always, and while she brings as much depth to the performance as she can, something still feels off. Just like her comic counterpart, Wanda isn't in full control of her actions. Perhaps this is to make it easier to walk back the damage she does later. I just would have loved to see a true progression of how it got here.
Everything you're looking for is perfectly understandable through the implications. Whether it's the end scene of WandaVision with her seeing the Darkhold, or her actual explanation of how she got here in the movie, or other people's reaction to how she got here in the movie, like, this is explained. Or you can even look at it from the context of her entire MCU arc. Again, look at the summary video done by BHL Hudson and understand that she's been teetering between villain and anti-hero the entire fucking time, and then this was her Joker one bad day scenario. And again, there's another example of a character very much being driven this kind of mad under similar circumstances. So again, if your argument is, but there's misogyny, explain the Joker, explain the Spectre, and explain John Wick to me. Yeah, male characters who have had this kind of shit done to them all the fucking time. You just don't like when it happens to a woman because women have to be pure, morally speaking, in your ideology. It's just like the aforementioned evangelical Christian whining that she's a witch and being asked to be sympathetic to a witch character. Yeah, your morality isn't the center of the universe. Get over it.
Moving on.
Yeah.
Oh, hold on. Dragon Tail, you saying you wouldn't hex someone over killing your own cat? Authenticator.
Oh no, I would. That I have been known to do much worse to people or threatened to do much worse to people over smaller things than that. So yeah. And another great example of this exact scenario, um, Dracula from Netflix's Castlevania committed a fucking mass genocide because he lost his wife because his wife was burned at the stake. So once again, you say that this never happens to male characters, but I can think of at least 5 examples of this happening to male characters. So me.
Right. I just speaking of your cat, they have been like meowing a lot.
Yeah, she's noisy lately. I think the heat is getting to her, and I think maybe she's getting older and she has aches in her bones and she wants me to do something about it, but I can't do anything about it. No, I can't do anything about it because you won't tell me what you need, love. It's the thing. Kitty cat, you're okay. Come here. There we go. You're okay. I know it hurts. You're fine, though. Okay, she seems to be good for the moment.
I think we're in the final stretch of this article, so
Yep.
Marvel doesn't have to repeat the comics mistakes.
They weren't mistakes. You just don't like them because of morality.
I loved the Scarlet Witch for a long time. I even dressed up as her for Halloween back in 2015. She's a fascinating character, and it's great that more recent stories like Jamie Robinson's run includes amazing artists such as the late Steve Dillon have tried to better illustrate that one particular exceptional story. I've tried to better illustrate that. Sorry, I didn't see a period there.
Mm-hmm.
One particular exceptional story is Alan Heinberg and Jim Cheung's, saying the name wrong, I'm sorry. Uh, Avengers, the Children's Crusade, which reunites Wanda with her long lost sons. Once again, Scarlet Witch is something of a pawn, but she finally makes her own decisions. Plus, anything with the Young Avengers is automatically awesome.
Okay, I'll give that to you. Children's Crusade is awesome, mostly because it does set up my boys. You know, Hulkling and Wiccan are the best gay couple in comics. So I'll give you that one. But
To be
my
fair, a lot of them.
yeah, my question though for you is what makes Children's Crusade better than something like House of M for you? Because as you say, if you want to see her as a pawn in Children's Crusade, you can see her as a pawn in Children's Crusade. My supposition is that neither of these stories is a problem. You somehow want to arbitrate that one of these stories is a problem and the other one is not. And I'm not entirely sure how or why you make that distinction. And neither is my cat, apparently.
MCU Wanda has experienced immeasurable trauma just like her comic counterpart. However, rather than confronting her loss of vision or Quicksilver in this movie, we're given little beyond I'm not a monster, Stephen, I'm a mother. Wanda also brings up how Stephen's actions mirror her own, and yet only one of them is labeled a villain. This is true, but we're really given any reason in this movie to see Wanda as anything else.
Because for one, her arc is not done yet. Because may I be struck by lightning if I am mistaken about this, but I very much doubt that she didn't teleport away at the last second at the end of the movie, and we will see her again. Um, Also, uh, the reason why one of them is considered the hero and one of them is considered a villain is when Strange makes the argument to Wanda, she blows him off and continues down her dark path until she finally can't be faced with her consequences anymore. But when Strange is faced with, oh shit, that's how my in the grand calculus of the multiverse line sounds to other people. I should reform my character in this way. That's the difference. The difference is when Strange is confronted with his mistakes and his faults, he attempts to correct them, when Wanda is confronted with her mistakes and her faults, she carries on all the way up until the point that her own children are looking up at her in hatred and throwing toys at her. And then and only then does she realize, oh shit, I done fucked up. Several dozen dead bodies later. That's why one of them is the hero and one of them is the villain. Because yes, they have the same rationale, but one of them internalizes the fact that okay, that rationale is a slippery slope and I should do something to correct it, and one of them drives herself so crazy under the sway of the Darkhold that she literally almost kills her own children and a alternate version of herself. It's a bit of a big difference, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Moving on.
Look, I adore the MCU, and definitely not to think Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is a bad movie. It's just that Marvel had the opportunity to make Wanda a compelling villain, and instead they took their cues from the comics and had her snap in an instant with no exploration of her own perspective.
You had 8 episodes of her own perspective, and apparently all it did was confuse you. Or 9 episodes of her own perspective, excuse me. And she is still a compelling villain in the movie. Given that her motivation is I had what I thought was my kids. It turned out they were fictional, but it turned out also that I'm the odd one out and I'm the only one of me that doesn't have these kids. And then along comes the Darkhold whispering and says, if you just summon up a few demons, I can take you to a child who has the power to uh, give them to you, and she's a danger to the multiverse, so as it turns out, you'll be doing everyone a favor by taking her powers.
Yeah.
It's roughly the same rationale as the Joker's One Bad Day, or the events of Todd Phillips' Joker movie, which again gives lie to the whole "you wouldn't do this if it weren't a woman" derp. The only difference is when Arthur Fleck or the Killing Joke Joker does the same shit that Wanda does, they're treated as less sympathetic than Wanda. I mean, you could kind of make an argument that John Wick is treated as more sympathetic, but to be fair, he doesn't kill indiscriminately. He's after specifically the people who fucked up his life.
Yeah.
Yeah, moving on.
Elizabeth Olsen showed astounding range in her WandaVision performance. It's a shame Marvel's next step was to bring Wanda back around to being a tired trope. However, Olsen's not done in the MCU, and the studio can find a way to rewrite Scarlet Witch's story. After all, what are comics without retcons?
Well, there's that, but there's also the fact that a very obvious retcon was set up by the end of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness when she disappeared in a red puff of smoke, effectively. So my money is on she teleported to Agatha and is going to beg Agatha to teach her, because that would be the next logical step, given the projects we know that are coming down the line in future MCU. Given that Agatha has her own show now, I imagine, and given that the same writing team is working on Agatha House of Harkness as worked on WandaVision Episode 8, which is where Agatha takes Wanda to witch school, it wouldn't surprise me if Agatha ends up taking Wanda as her apprentice, redeeming herself in the interim, and then survives long enough to be the Fantastic Four's nanny when it comes time for Franklin and Valeria to be a thing. Because lest we forget, that was how Agatha was first introduced. She was introduced as basically the Mary Poppins, and I wouldn't be surprised if Disney didn't make that joke to Franklin and Valeria Richards.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that was the end of that article, and so we're moving on to another article that Dalton sent me.
Yep.
Which, and full disclosure, simply because my computer is old and stuff, we had to resort to a document. If you want to read the actual article, there is a link down below in the description.
Yeah, and I did not change it apart from getting rid of the ads and the pictures and such.
Yeah. All right. The MCU puts a lot on Doctor Strange's shoulders, and it isn't fair. By Robert Vaughn Box. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. To summarize, yes, I agree that the MCU puts a lot on Doctor Strange's shoulders, but to be fair, every universe wherein there's a Doctor Strange who is the master of the mystic arts puts a lot on Doctor Strange's shoulders, and I don't think it's unfair because that's Doctor Strange's whole character arc. Doctor Strange is the guy who has to basically learn to stalemate the entire universe. The universe wants to fall to pieces, and Doctor Strange is the last line of defense to prevent it from doing so.
right. So, and this was also published uh, May May 31st, 2022.
Okay, so moving on.
Yeah. The former Sorcerer Supreme has held the MCU together since the events of Avengers Endgame. It's
Okay,
with a cost that, frankly, he doesn't deserve.
okay, two things. One, where did you get the information that he was a former Sorcerer Supreme? We have not as yet been informed that he was ever Sorcerer Supreme. And I'm annoyed by the people who go, well, he must have been Sorcerer Supreme at some point. Yeah, no. There's nothing to imply that he was ever Sorcerer Supreme yet in the MCU. Secondly, um, putting this kind of weight on Doctor Strange is crucial to his character arc. So no, it's not unfair. Unless you want to say that it's always unfair that it happens to Doctor Strange. But that's part of his character arc. And if you don't understand that, you don't really understand Doctor Strange's character. Because as I've often said, Doctor Strange if we go with Shakespeare's quote of all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players, Doctor Strange is the unsung stagehand who maintains the stage so that all the actors can have their hour on the stage. Um, that's the purpose of Doctor Strange, and in particular the Sorcerer Supreme. Um, to put it another way, if the universe is a giant computer, the Sorcerer Supreme is basically the antivirus software. Moving on.
Yeah. Okay. The loss of Tony Stark and Steve Rogers at the conclusion of Avengers Endgame put a hole in the center of the Marvel Cinematic Universe that is yet to be filled. It's very much by design. Phase 4 of the franchise explicitly deals with themes of grief and loss, which includes the death of some of Earth's greatest defenders. The Avengers have all but disbanded, with Thor off planet and Hulk easing into low key retirement. Neither of them were strict leaders to begin with, and until the Fantastic Four arrive, presumably at the end of Phase 4, that's unlikely to change.
That's fair. I have no arguments there, really.
Okay. Um, the de facto heir apparent to leadership of the MCU's collected heroes has fallen to Doctor Strange, who remains committed to protecting reality and played a key role in Spider-Man No Way Home, as well as his own Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. For better or worse, he seems to be holding the MCU together at the moment. It's not a job he asked for, nor one he wants. And unlike both Tony and Steve, he has to be terrible to people close to him in order to do it sometimes. To quote the Scarlet Witch, that doesn't seem fair.
I mean, in the broadest sense, maybe not, but this is literally his arc in the comics. This is this is literally what Doctor Strange does. He's not a superhuman. He doesn't have enhanced durability, enhanced, stamina, enhanced abilities like that. But he still is the guy who has to put himself between entities that want to destroy physical reality and say, this far, no further. Um, That's partially the purpose of the Sorcerer Supreme and Doctor Strange is the world is intent on falling to pieces, and Doctor Strange, in all of his chess mastery type ways, has to be the one to basically stalemate the universe. I.e., every day that goes by where the sun rises and people's nightmares haven't eaten them alive is a small victory for Doctor Strange, and his job is to make sure that he stalemates the universe often enough that people can go on about their lives and never notice how close they came to disaster. That's why Doctor Strange is always in the background of the comics and why he doesn't ever get the parades and the credit like all the other heroes do, is because if Doctor Strange is doing his job right, you won't notice he's there, because his whole job is to maintain the laws of physics and make sure they don't become the strongly worded letters or civil ordinances of physics.
Right.
Moving on.
Strange has been charged with the inevitable task of holding the MCU together even before the events of Endgame and Avengers Infinity War. That includes acting as the bearer of bad tidings to an inconscionable number of his fellow heroes, starting with Stark in Endgame. Strange knew that the only way to stop them was give the snap. The one possibility out of over 14 million he saw meant that Tony would have to die. He's well aware. Oh wait, hold on. Sorry. He goes through the climax of Endgame, understanding that to the point that where he has to raise a shaky finger to the sky to alert Tony to move on Thanos. He's sending Iron Man to his death. He's well aware of it, and he has to do it regardless because it's the only way to stop the Mad Titan. At least the one that he was fully aware of.
Yeah, well, I mean, given the variables of 14,604 to 1, I don't mind that he stopped. Also, it's worth noting that while there might be an infinite number of possibilities, there probably is not an infinite number of possibilities with the characters they had. Like there was a different set of possibilities for the Illuminati because there were different characters involved in the Illuminati. There was Xavier, there was Black Bolt, there was Captain Carter, and so on and so forth. So even if there are a de facto infinite number of possibilities, some percentage of those infinite possibilities would have to be limited by the fact that there's only certain characters available at the time. It's not like he could have gone to is it Adelan? That's the capital city of the Inhumans, and
Yeah,
gotten Black Bolt because to his knowledge there was no Black Bolt at the time, or somebody like that. So yeah. Also, given that based on what we see in the Dormammu time loop and also in the What If time loop where he's trying to save Christine, um, he has to live through all those timelines, which means he has to live through millions upon millions of his own death, not to mention watching everyone else die repeatedly. I'm willing to give him the out of you've checked 14,605 and found one where they win. Go with the one where they win and stop torturing yourself, basically.
yeah. The trend of sacrifice and the few for the sake of many has continued into Phase 4. Spider-Man No Way Home, he had to complete the spell of forgetfulness, basically erase Peter Parker's life. As with Tony, he looks Peter in the eye as he's doing so, ensuring that he understands what this is doing to a fellow hero who only wants to help you. Okay, Peter wanted it though. That's
Yeah, 90% of the blame for No Way Home goes on the shoulders of Peter himself
yeah,
for not being able to shut the fuck up for 5 seconds and let the man work. And also he asked. So you ask for something and then don't let the man work while he's doing it. And maybe this is me projecting my, wizardly knowledge onto things, but little advice for all of the would-be abusers of magic out there. When the circle comes up, you shut up the fuck up and let me work. Them's the rules. When the circle has started, you are shutting the fuck up. And if you don't, shit happens. Because that is like magical etiquette 101. When the ritual starts, you need to shut the fuck up and let the person work.
Right.
Anyway, moving on.
It gets worse with the Scarlet Witch in Multiverse of Madness. For the sake of all creation, he's forced to stop a woman overcoming grief, but really just wants to see her little boys again. That she's a threat to the multiverse doesn't diminish her pain, nor his need to exacerbate it for the sake of the greater good.
Yes, and this is one of the reasons why the arc in Multiverse of Madness works, because their arcs mirror each other. She fully embraces his in the grand calculus of the multiverse logic, and he is faced with looking at her and seeing, oh, shit, that's what I sound like to other people. I really need to reform this because treating people like disposable chess pieces in the grand calculus of the multiverse has a very, very slippery slope to it.
Yeah. You know,
Moving on.
on top of that comes a considerable number of personal sacrifices, starting with his wealth, which, as early dialogue in Infinity War indicates, has vanished. On a far more important level, he's led to he has had to let Christine Palmer move on with her life, with the understanding that a future he with her may never be possible. He's even lost the title of Sorcerer Supreme, which now belongs to the non-blipped Wong. And, but for Wong, he would be utterly alone in his Bleecker Street mansion, with
Uh,
only his hope for company. I had to finish it.
yeah, okay. But again, just to be clear, there is no evidence that he was ever Sorcerer Supreme. He did not he did not lose the title to the best of our knowledge. There is a high likelihood that he never had it to begin with. But incidentally, this is always how Doctor Strange's arc goes because the Masters of the Mystic Arts in the comics are very heavily influenced and based on Buddhist philosophy. Therefore, personal attachments get in the way of spiritual goals and spiritual elevation. So he always has to forego personal attachments in favor of doing what's right by the universe. Yeah, and while I agree this isn't exactly fair, that's kind of the necessary thing for Doctor Strange. He's kind of like Atlas if Atlas didn't have physical strength. His job is to take the existential worries of the universe on his shoulders so that everyone else in the universe can go on not knowing them. I.e., if it weren't for Doctor Strange, the sun might not rise tomorrow, or your nightmares might literally eat you alive, or you know, um, to paraphrase Denzel Crocker from The Fairly Odd Parents, 2 plus 2 might equal fish, or something. But Doctor Strange, if he's doing his job right, you don't notice because his job is to make sure that the laws of physics stay the laws of physics and aren't free to vary. Like I said, if the universe itself can be analogized to a computer program, as we see with the Ancient One describing magic as the source code that shapes reality, then the Sorcerer Supreme's job and Doctor Strange's job is to be the antivirus software for the computer that is the universe. It's why, despite the fact that I hate most of what the first Doctor Strange movie did, the one scene that nobody can criticize is the scene where he comes to bargain with Dormammu, because being willing to put his life and suffering on the line for the sake of all reality is very much Doctor Strange's thing.
You know,
Yep. Moving
I,
on.
His life is isolated as Peter's in many ways, and while he's hardly the only superhero to suffer for his obligations, that doesn't make it any easier. I don't have anything to say there.
Yeah, no, it's true, but my issue is this person is acting like it's a new thing when this is the entire like crux of Doctor Strange's like character arc and motivation in the comics too.
Oh,
He's
yeah,
he's yeah, he's the guy who he's the guy who puts the weight of the universe on his shoulders so no one else has to.
uh, Dragon Turtle, because we're near the end anyway. Ironically, he sometimes protects reality by altering a bit himself. After all, music notes are not normally deadly.
I mean, no, but that once again calls back to what the ancient how the ancient one describes magic in the MCU is magic is the source code that shapes reality and spells are basically a programming language. And anyone who's familiar with music theory knows that music is basically sonic and emotional programming language. So him being able to weaponize concepts like music and channeling energy into it and making them solid constructs is actually one of the most literal translations of his powers and one of the most um, good and creative uses of his powers in the entire MCU thus far. That's why I got really annoyed with the fact that all he used magic for up until this point pretty much um was creating energy construct weapons because it's like the whole impetus of your powers is altering reality on a logical level rather than an empirical one. You should be able to do more with this than just conjuring weapons. And moreover, given that we see he can literally conjure objects like he does with the beer with Thor and Thor Ragnarok, if you need a sword, why don't you just conjure a literal sword rather than an energy based one?
You
But
know,
yeah, no, I really love the music scene. It makes sense from almost like a Neoplatonic perspective of literally
Don.
his weapon logic is his weapon, therefore he can literally just take concept constructs and shoot them at things.
Moving on.
Moving on, yeah. Sorry.
Indeed, the unfairness of it all is one of the things that set Marvel apart from its rival DC Comics in the early days. While Clark Kent and Bruce Wayne lived comparatively stable lives with copious resources and healthy relationships, Marvel's roster has always had relatable problems that didn't go away just because they had superpowers. Those problems inevitably got worse owing to their double existence, to the point where those around them could be killed, Gwen Stacy being the canonical example. Strange's heroes are no different, extracting a terrible personal cost in exchange for doing the right thing and offering no real alternative.
Yeah. And this is why I'm confused as to why this article is written because the way it's being framed is as though this is a new development for cinematic Strange, when in actuality this is one of the only things he has in common with his comic book counterpart. Really, is um the need to basically um be the arbiter of the laws of physics, so that other people don't have to.
Uh, Dragon Turtle, the injury one might be better than a physical one.
I,
Sort
I
of.
mean, I mean that's true, but what I'm saying is, um, even given what the Ancient One describes in the first Doctor Strange, and this is another one of the few things I felt like Doctor Strange one got right is while scientists are forced to play within the empirical rules of reality, magicians and magic users weaponize the logic that underpins that physical reality. So given that you can literally weaponize concepts or like the infrastructure that reality is underpinned by, why would you limit yourself to just creating energy constructs? why I really, really love the music scene, because it's a very literal translation of magic is weaponizing the source code of reality and spells are a programming language. Therefore, I can literally take the literal concept of music as demonstrated in the programming language of music theory and shoot you with it.
Yeah.
It's very platonic. Yes, moving on.
Last paragraph.
Yes.
Oh no, wait, hold on, sorry. Strange heroes are different, extracting terrible personal costs in exchange for doing the right thing and offering no real alternative. Um, I don't really have anything. I mean, yeah,
Yeah, that's again, it's the one thing that he has in common with his comic book counterpart, is that Doctor Strange can very easily be summed up by a quote of all things from the Matrix, specifically Matrix 2. The Oracle describes um, programs in relation to the Matrix, and says something to the effect of the programs that do what they're meant to do, you don't even notice they're there, but the ones that go against their prescribed role, you hear about them all the time. Every time you've heard someone say they've seen an angel or a ghost, that's the system assimilating something, a program that's doing something it shouldn't be doing. That's very much also applicable to Doctor Strange and the Masters of the Mystic Arts. Is their job again is to kind of be the antivirus software for reality.
all right. Last article. I mean, not last paragraph.
Yeah.
That's another trait Strange shares with multiple fellow MCU hero figures, with his status as mystical defender in part of a kind of penance for earlier arrogance and narcissism. And yet, unlike, say, Tony or Thor, he hadn't done any harm before being thrust into his current role.
I mean, he was a doctor, and he kind of shortchanged a bunch of people who needed healing and help before he became a sorcerer. So it sort of depends on he didn't. It sort of depends on what you mean by he didn't do any harm before he became a sorcerer. Because I imagine the guy who was on who was on his deathbed hoping for help would probably disagree with you there.
Um, Certainly he was cold and difficult to get along with, but he was still a surgeon, using his skills to save lives. Granted, again, I would argue that he did it more so out of vanity reasons.
Yeah, he the thing with Doctor Strange is Western medicine did kind of a number on him, because he has a natural desire to and capacity to heal. But because Western medicine is so dead materialistic and so focused on personal aggrandizement, it kind of fucked him over. That's why I really hate when modern Doctor Strange stories make too much of a connection between him being a doctor and him being a sorcerer, because he's supposed to have given up his position as a medical doctor to become a sorcerer, because it serves both his personal growth and reality better. But incidentally, if we are to take his life pre-sorcery on board in this point, he picks and chooses who lives and who dies before he becomes a sorcerer. He picks and chooses what um what deadly um, neurological issue kills somebody and doesn't. Especially because when you consider that he's a famous neurosurgeon, he kind of treats the people that are on that are in the most severe and most dire straits they could possibly be in. So given that he picks and chooses who lives and who dies in that instance, he was he was kind of a dick um before becoming a sorcerer, because imagine having a cancer that no one else on the planet can operate on, and Doctor Strange is your last hope, and he goes, "Yeah, sorry, your particular case of inoperable brain cancer isn't interesting enough. and won't result in enough personal gratification for me and my fame. So you just die now. Sorry. Yeah, it's I'm getting a lot of humor out of the idea of, well, he didn't really hurt anyone before he became a sorcerer. Yeah, no, he very much did, because if his surgeon skills were so great that he was like the surgeon of last resort for a lot of people, and he still picks and chooses who lives and who dies, um, Dick is the answer to that.
Right.
Why
Uh,
I wish they had let him be more of an arrogant bastard in his movie, because they didn't really let his arrogance become visible enough, and they had him still sticking to the Hippocratic Oath, which I thought was weird. Um, he really should have been more like House from House, basically.
I, uh, Unlike Tony, who sold weapons to terrorists, or Thor, who started a war with the Frost Giants in a fit of pique, uh, or pick. Yeah.
No, it's peak.
Okay.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah. The QU thing always confuses me sometimes. So.
yeah.
Right. Strange suffered as they did for far less, and continues to do so in the name of the mantle that neither of them are capable of carrying any longer. It may be
I
necessary.
mean,
He certainly didn't ask for any of it.
it depends on what you mean as not harming anyone, because again, you know, you get stage 4 inoperable brain cancer tomorrow, and only Stephen Strange is a good enough neurosurgeon to deal with it, but he has a waiting list, and he picks and chooses his clients based on who will give him the biggest challenge, or the biggest fame, or the biggest boost to his ego, or just the biggest, um, fascination by interest. Um, I don't know about you, but if my loved one or myself are on death's door, and the one person capable of fixing me goes, "I'm sorry, your case of inoperable deadly brain tumor just isn't interesting enough for me, so you just die now." Um, I I dare say that my last thoughts might be something along the lines of, "You fucking bastard." Because I've because of my disability, I've literally dealt with surgeons for most of my life, and I'll tell you a story about this one time. Um, the time before last, when I was up to get my baclofen pump replaced, um, the surgeon didn't put it back in right, so it ended up kinking, and I ended up going through drug withdrawals that would have almost killed me if they hadn't have fixed it. And even after the second time he put it back in, he turns to me and my mother and says, "Well, I think I put it back in correctly. We'll just have to wait and see." And as you can imagine, my mother and I both looked at each other like, if anything goes wrong with this pump, we're suing his ass. Also, um, he actually didn't put the pump back in himself, because while my mom was waiting for me to get out of surgery, she saw him in the cafeteria getting lunch, and apparently he had one of his trainees putting the pump back in. Um, and obviously, this was not a case where my life was super, super under threat or anything, and I was still pretty damn pissed off about it. Um, so I can imagine if this were a extremely deadly disorder or case where surgery was necessary, and there was only one doctor in the world who could do anything, and he just arbitrarily decided who lived and who died based on which of them was most interesting to him that day. Yeah, I'd be thinking Dick.
Jack Turrell, is there a ton of elitism for doctors slash surgeons like high-level academics. I, well, to be fair, I haven't really been to a hospital in a while, mainly because I haven't really gotten sick or anything. So I wouldn't know.
It depends on what you mean by elitism. There are some doctors who very much do see themselves as God's gift to the world, and there are some doctors who are generally pretty nice about it. If you mean like um, in terms of their particular skill sets being held in high esteem, yes, there are doctors who are considered like the world's foremost expert in like a particular um severe disease or disorder or whatever. Um, but in terms of attitude, it depends on the doctor. There are some doctors who genuinely do just want to help anyone they can and will do whatever they can to do so. And there are some doctors who are dicks. And there are some doctors who apparently, like a couple months away from retirement, would just foist it off on one of their trainees and then lie to me and my mother's face when we ask, are you absolutely sure you did this right? Um, and by the way, he didn't, because that was the whole impetus behind the malfunction that I most recently had to deal with, where I ended up having to have the thing taken out and switched to the oral version. So, yeah, if he wasn't retired, I would have sued his ass, but he's retired now. So, and apparently, I was one of the last cases he dealt with right before he retired. So, sucks to be me, I guess.
What a prick.
I almost died of his cliche poisoning. That's not even fair.
And last sentence.
Mhm.
Too, even the likes of Stephen Strange still can't catch a break. I mean, that's kind of the point of.
And again, this is one of the few things that is consistent with his role in the comics as well. Stephen Strange is constantly burdened by the fact that every single choice he makes might be the difference between reality continuing normally for the next few days or everything in existence collapsing into an existential void. And that's why he's always the more serious one whenever he's tasked with dealing with a problem. Because but and I think it's even been alluded to in several Doctor Strange comics, something to the effect of by the time anyone finds their way to my door, I know it's serious. Because not only does he just not deal with problems that are smaller than that, but also because he is a magical weirdo, for lack of a better phrase, normal people just don't want to. Most people don't even believe in magic, for one, so they have to be desperate to even be considering his help anyway. And for another thing, a lot of people have religious fixations against turning to a sorcerer. So by the time average Joe Blow or average Jane Blow is willing to consider a sorcerer's help, um, shit's pretty freaking dire. Anyway, moving on.
Um, I don't know how to start this, like, because I kind of want to give a preface to this. Rachel, so he's sort of like a wizard, Harry, a wizard who is usually people's last resort.
Yeah.
Harry Dresden, I assume, not Harry Potter.
For that, you get a metaphorical boot to the head for even insinuating that Potter could be a correct answer to anything. But yes, he was referring to Dresden.
Obviously, I was joking because I mean, it was right there.
Yes, I know, but nevertheless, boot to the head.
All right, so preface for this. Well, I saw this trailer and I kind of wanted to cover it because it's related to a topic that I'm very interested in, and I worked on something because I had seen this and stuff, and yeah. So CW's Gotham Knights official trailer.
Oh dear, CW, why?
I saw this like once, and it's 3 minutes and 30 seconds, basically.
All right, banana.
Bat Nana. Well, no, actually, because
Batman.
Batman ain't in this fucking thing.
Well, it's still like Batman adjacent and Bat family related, so Batnana.
Fair enough. Bat Nana.
Batnana.
There are 30 other rooms in this place to hook up.
Mom, I swear we were just talking.
Thanks.
Harry, we have to drink together?
Right, sorry.
Oh, somebody broke into the good stuff. Your dad gonna be okay with that?
I don't think he'll miss it. It's questionable choices. Everybody relax.
I mean, it could be worse, but this really looks cringe.
I mean, when it has a CW nominate something that looks cringe. I remember a lot of people saying this
Superman
was.
and Lois. Superman and Lois is actually decent.
Yeah, well, that is the exception. Anything else, really, to be honest.
Uh-huh.
But I remember a lot of people saying that this is like superhero Riverdale, or like a copy of Riverdale. But
Yeah.
here's the thing. This is very bland, like in terms of color and stuff.
Yeah. Riverdale at least has style. Yeah.
Yeah, this fairly it's super bland. And like I speak as a guy who's done color editing for things.
Looks like a superhero sitcom almost, actually.
Yeah, there actually was one. They tried to make one for the NBC, but it never really took off. I don't remember what it's called, but yeah.
I think I know the one you mean.
Yeah, it had Alan Tudyk in it, who played like a cousin to Bruce Wayne. It was like average people in the DC universe.
Oh, I didn't realize it was actually DC. I was thinking of a completely different show that was like superhero sitcom.
The Tick? No, that's MTV.
No, not the Tick. It was like an average suburban family that had superpowers. I forget what it's called.
Thundermans from Nickelodeon?
No, it was for ABC, and it was like the early 2000s. I remember because I saw a trailer for it like while I was watching an episode of Desperate Housewives once as a kid.
So we're just gonna roll over the fact that you just said you watched Desperate Housewives growing up.
Yes, it was one of the first shows me and my mom watched together, and we watched it as a family. It was always right after Extreme Makeover Home Edition.
That is the gayest thing I've ever heard.
I would hope so.
Right, but yeah, I don't really have much to say for the first 20 seconds, just because it's pretty bog standard, like teen,
Yeah.
stereotypical teen.
Yeah, it's not even very super heroic at the moment. It's just bad teen sitcom.
I kind of understand that in a certain way. Yeah, I can kind of understand that it's like a kind of normal world before before the characters are thrown into, the odd world.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Anyway,
Batnana.
Batnana.
Got this.
Harvey. Turner, it's your father. He's dead. I have to ask you, did you know he was Batman?
You don't have to keep the secret any longer. It must be a relief.
Yeah, that's what I'm feeling. Relief.
Okay, the guy who came to deliver the news is either the biggest idiot in the world or just a dick.
That's Misha Collins playing Harvey Dent.
Okay, good for you, actor who plays Cass. But your character is nonetheless a dick, sir.
It's Harvey Dent.
Well, yeah. You you either die an angel or live long enough to see yourself become a demon.
Right, but yeah, it's just
Because Castiel, sorry, I couldn't help myself but make that joke.
yeah, everything's just so fucking great. Which, I mean, Batman stuff, I could kind of understand, but
Okay, but even good Batman stuff is stylized in its like dinginess, like
yeah,
Snyderverse stuff, the new Batman. It was all very, dingy and nihilistic and gray, but it was also extremely stylized.
yeah, even Gotham, like the show.
Yeah, and for as much as every other aspect of Batwoman was shies, and it was, the aesthetics of the show were at least good.
They're okay.
Well, what I mean is, compared to everything else in the show, it was very obvious someone at least tried with the aesthetic.
Even Arrow, like the early Arrow seasons, had this kind of dourness, but they still had pops of color.
Yeah, it was still a stylized dark. Or another great example, the Tim Burton Batman movies, very very dark, but also caked in stylized whimsy because Tim Burton.
All right. Moving on.
Batman.
My father believed that each of us could become a light and bring a new dawn to Gotham.
Can't imagine what you must be going through. I am going to find who did this.
It's just the latest in an epidemic of violence since the demise of the Dark Knight.
To wonder who will protect Gotham now that Batman is dead.
We have 3 suspects in custody.
See, I am a little bit annoyed that Misha Collins is using his Castiel voice because I assumed that he'd be playing Harvey Dent with his regular voice. Because he actually, if you listen to interviews with him, doesn't sound anything like Cass, but he appears to be dusting off the Cass voice for Harvey.
Right.
It's a bit annoying.
Okay. I mean, okay, overall premise isn't bad, but it doesn't look like they're really utilizing it at.
Yeah, no, they're going through the motions, and it looks really sad.
It's very
They're just
telling.
going through.
The weird thing is, I'm almost getting like a Titans vibe.
Yeah,
But the weird thing is, I've seen people say that Titans looks better than this, which is very telling how bad this is.
yeah. I mean, at least aesthetically, yeah. I'm sure. I'm almost positive the writing will be better because the writing of Titans is shies, but
That's not really saying much. That's a very low bar.
yeah, no, yeah. The bar that you'd have to go over for that is literally like encased in bedrock at this point. Though I will say, I think Titans is slowly getting better over the seasons. The first season was absolute dog shit, and they seem to be getting a little bit better as they go. Still very low bar, but nevertheless, credit where it's due. They seem to at least not be getting any worse.
Okay, and there's also this weird thing. It's like, this is a thing I made sure to do whenever I was ever doing editing and stuff for things. is that I would keep a list of. I'll get to my point, but I keep a list of like what scenes or settings have a specific color palette, like what filter I would use to make sure I have a
Right.
consistency in the scenes, right?
Mm-hmm.
This all just looks like it takes place in the same, like it's all the same, like dingy gray. There's no difference in color.
Yeah, there's no stylization at all. And to call back to what we were saying earlier about this basically being superhero Riverdale, at the very, Riverdale is whatever Riverdale is, and your opinions on that may vary and whatnot. But at the very least, they know how to demonstrate color.
Dude, like I remember watching the first trailer when it first came, like the first ever trailer, and it had a very neon retro.
Yeah, they were trying to take the color palette of like an Archie comic and transplant it into a real life setting, which makes perfect sense given that they were basing it on an Archie comic.
Yeah. Yeah, again, like the weird color palette is like it just looks like it's all in the same. It takes place like in the same dingy, grungy location, and not even in a good way, just bland.
Yeah, it's not stylized dingy or grungy. It's just dingy gray cubes of nothing in particular worth paying attention to.
Yeah.
It's the nihilistic realism trademark thing.
Well, even I'd argue the Nolan movies had more pop of color and stuff.
Yeah, they did. They did.
Anyway,
even Unbreakable is better at using color than this.
Oh, dude, that is actually that is a good example of using color.
How you actually do a grounded superhero story correctly while still maintaining the like color palettes and stuff.
Anyway, going.
Batman.
There's your fingerprints on the gun that killed Bruce Wayne. That's not what happened.
We were paid to break into his office, not kill him.
It's like a museum. Had sex with the bank vault.
They're just trying to get us to turn on each other.
My brother walks.
I try to get the truth. Are you really the Joker's daughter?
I would like.
See,
a weird edit. This weird editing here.
There's nothing to grab onto because it's all just this gray wash. I don't like.
Yeah, like
what am I
switching between the scenes and like it still looks the same.
Yeah, like I don't like if you're gonna like again, Joker was a very dark, very dingy, very grungy movie that was literally supposed to highlight how awful Gotham was. But their color scheme was fucking amazing.
Yeah, it's so weird.
Like it's not that it's not the subject matter is not an excuse because you can do dingy and gray in a stylized manner.
Yeah, like literally the Batman did this not too long ago.
Yeah, the Batman did it, Joker did it, the Tim Burton Batman movies did it. The Snyder movies fucking did it for all the faults of that movie. At least aesthetically looked good.
Yeah. Anyway.
Batman.
I'd like to speak with my legal counsel.
You shouldn't have shot her kneecap. Turner, there's one more suspect.
They think they killed my dad because I wanted his money?
Hey, I'm sorry.
Oh, look. It's the Bat Rat.
Oh, you haven't figured it out? We didn't kill your dad any more than you did.
Okay, here's another good example. In The Magicians, in the TV show The Magicians, the mundane world, the non-magical world, is literally supposed to look gray and devoid of color, and they're still better at using gray and devoid of color aesthetic.
I think also it kind of it's the camera that's being used too.
Yeah, And it's not like the CW doesn't have the money, because they do like 15 different superhero shows at once. So,
well, no, I think it's being shot on the same camera those shows are, but like, I don't know. It's just like they're not being creative. There's no creativity here.
like as cheesy as Smallville was, and it was much better than this.
Arrow was too in the early seasons. Flash as well. Like
Yeah.
the weirdest thing, like you're right. They're going through the motions, and it also feels like there's no.
It feels like everyone on the crew for this show just went, well, I guess we're making this show now. Ha 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 ha. Go through the motions, just do the job. And it's like, do something interesting, damn you.
Yeah, and we'll get on to the original character, like the main protagonist. There's an OC later on. I want to talk more technical here, just because I feel like that everyone's talked about the story and the characters and stuff,
which does this show no favors. Let's be perfectly clear on that. There's nothing.
But that, I always want to talk more about certain things.
But they obviously didn't even try to do anything interesting with the aesthetics either. So
it's so weird. I don't know. It's weird to me. Even as much as I despise Batwoman, and I do.
Yeah.
They fucked over that character so much.
Yeah, and go back through some of the old episodes of this show where we suffered through week by week different episodes of Batwoman. That was one of the most horrifyingly suffering-inducing things we've ever done for this show.
The writing, the writing was terrible, but it had at least some interesting aesthetics, even though it was still made cheap.
Yeah, and Alice, the actress who played Alice, at least knew what kind of show she was in and was hamming it the fuck up, because she basically was female Joker in that show.
Right. Anyway, not to mention, there are characters in here that I've done research on for a thing I'll get to later that are completely devoid of the actual characters that were created in the comics.
Oh joy, the character and name only thing. I really hate when they do that.
Yeah, it's so weird. Anyway, shall we?
They don't care if we're innocent. Time to pick a side.
Well, I'm
trying to get this stuff done. It's not working. Colin and Harper no problem getting theirs off.
Just why?
The music is not great.
No.
I could barely see anything.
Yeah, I don't even know what I'm supposed to be looking at. Seriously.
I get that they're in a transport, but it's so fucking dark.
Yeah, it's obviously supposed to be a fight scene or something, but I don't. What am I looking at?
I mean, it could also be that we don't have it in high enough quality. But if I get it too high, it could cause problems for the stream. So.
Well, I mean, sure, but we've done reactions to other trailers on this quality level, and it wasn't a huge deal. So
it's the darkness itself, I wouldn't have a problem with if it popped more.
Yeah, if they were doing something with it that actually showed it as an aesthetic rather than just we were too lazy to figure out a filter to put on this to make it look interesting, so just take what we give you because reasons.
Even Black Lightning. Well, actually, no, Black Lightning was actually pretty good in terms of aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, there were scenes that had this kind of thing, but it looked a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Like this is one of my big issues with a lot of stuff in modern day Hollywood. We have more resources than we ever have in terms of filmmaking technology and abilities and different cameras and lenses and shit. Use some of it. We have more resources than we ever have on the TV level. Why aren't you making any use of it?
CW is cheap.
Well, but it's not even a cheapness thing because like
Blade.
magicians had a shoestring budget almost its entire run, and they still managed to do interesting things with it. And Riverdale isn't much more expensive than this show, and they still managed to make use. Like it's just the effort.
I'd also say laziness.
Yeah, it's because you can make a lot of really interesting choices on a small budget. I mean, look at fan films. Look at YouTube. Like there are episodes of like Atop the Fourth Wall, Bankara's show, or the Blockbuster Buster that are capable of being more visually interesting than this. And it's not, and they don't have no freaking millions of dollars to blow on shit. It's just being too lazy or too incompetent or too just not giving a fuck about your own work to actually try something.
Well, it's also like, I'll get into it later, but anyway. Shall we?
Yep, but Batman.
Batman.
He's in on it. They all are.
You just made my job easier.
Who the hell are you?
Carrie Kelly?
Wait, I know you. I'm Trey. So you knew my dad was Batman?
I became his.
Wait, that's supposed to be Carrie Kelly.
Yes.
Yet another example of character who was supposed to be ginger that they race swapped for no reason.
See, I've made my position known on this. I'm fine if an actor is given a role of a character who's not, in terms of an adaptation of a character who's not traditionally that actor.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Sure. But it's a small thing. It's just something I noticed. Like, can't you ever just get a ginger actor? Like Felicia Day could play Carrie Kelly. She'd be pretty good at the role, I think.
Although people say Carrie Kelly isn't a well-liked Robin. Although it doesn't seem like she's being Robin here. So I don't know if they're going to...
No, well, obviously she knew who Batman was, so she might have at least been a Robin at some point in the past.
Actually, apparently now seems like everyone knows who Batman was after he's dead.
After the reveal, but according to the dialogue, she knew beforehand. So
yeah, I think I paused at the moment where she said she was like the protege or something.
Yeah. Okay. So Batman.
Yeah. 1 sec. Batman.
Size and ears. Called me his little Robin.
We can't prove we're not killers by killing someone. We have to stick together, find who really killed my dad, and clear our names. Because we all deserve justice.
Yeah, this is not good. Like, I'm speaking this as objective. I'm not even speaking like as a fan of Batman or anything. I'm speaking like everything that's shown here.
There's no effort anywhere in the like. Everyone seems like they made this in a weekend after rolling out of bed, and the CW just took it.
Well, the actors do seem like they're putting in work, like the younger ones.
Okay, yeah, sure.
I will grant that, but everything else, from the technical aspect, it seems like everyone else is phoning it in.
It's not the actor's fault. I apologize to the actors for including you in the statement, but everyone behind the camera seems to just be phoning this in on a weekend or something. Why couldn't you just take the extra? Like, this is what bothers me. Is I know for a fact that I can get better lighting than this by using camera filters on my phone. So if I can do this, if I can get better shots than this using a camera filter on my phone, then surely the TV grade like editing software that they must have can get better than this.
That's actually more than anything. It's probably Adobe Premiere, because even
I've seen people on YouTube using Adobe Premiere. I almost used it myself, but I couldn't afford the software. But like I've seen people use Adobe Premiere for interesting shit. So why can't you just take the extra 5 minutes and put freaking filters over these shots so that it at least looks compelling, if nothing else?
Dragon Turtle, even if we weren't in the ginger side and there wasn't this blackwashing or crime whitewashing, then I'd still say don't change anything unless you have a good reason to. Again,
I mean,
I assume, I'm at least
yeah.
hoping, at the very least, that these actors were hired on due to merit and proving their skill.
Yeah, I hope so, but
yeah,
I don't mind it as long as the actor like proves themselves worthy of it. But it does make me mad that so many characters that have been ginger for decades in the source material just randomly get blackwashed, for lack of a better word. It's like once, twice, or 3 times I can live with. If it's a different network doing it, or if it's done just at random, that's one thing. But when every single character who's supposed to be like ginger or of Irish descent gets race swapped, it really does make it feel almost like they have a vendetta against people who are Irish. Which is ironic when you consider that the Irish were treated almost as badly as the people of color in history. So, if not worse.
I also want to point out that this does not feel like a superhero show at all.
No,
honestly, I would be fine with it if it was a crime drama. I think that would be interesting, but it doesn't really feel like that.
They're using the they're using the impetus of DC association to market the thing. So it's literally like it's literally like a show on the lowest possible effort setting, and it pisses me off.
Which is weird because the CW has made good shows before, and it's weird to see how there's little effort being put in now.
I mean, nobody really thought that Superman and Lois was going to be good, because the CW has been known to not really give that much of a fuck. But
to be fair,
Superman and Lois was pretty good.
They're also getting money. They're also getting money from HBO Max for that show. So
okay, fair enough. Which brings up the question of why don't you just outsource everything to HBO Max? Because between Superman and Lois, Stargirl, and the Doom Patrol, it seems like whoever HBO Max has behind the camera knows what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah. Anyway, shall we?
Bet now.
Hunt down these fugitives. They'll be looking for us in every alley, every dark corner of the city. There's one thing they don't have.
I'm sorry. This, like, objectively, this doesn't look good. Like,
no one tried, apart from the actors. And I just don't understand why. Like, why would you sign up to do a project and then not try?
Yeah, it's so weird.
Do you not have any self-respect at all? Like,
Um,
even if you're not being paid that much, you can at least put in your best effort. And I'm sorry, but if this is somebody's best effort, you should not be working in Hollywood. You should be doing something else with your life.
yeah. Anyway, that now.
Batman.
The Batcave.
Oh my god.
Hey, tell me, you brought the Batmobile, right?
Oh, my mom's car. Gonna be a tight squeeze.
I call shotgun!
Okay, this might be impressive if they hadn't have done this exact sequence once already in Batwoman. The reveal of the Batcave and the Batsuit and shit.
Yeah, I don't know, like that joke felt weirdly edited as well.
Yeah.
Like that just pause was so abrupt and awkward. And
Yep.
I don't know, it was weird to me.
It was either a really awkward read and they had to edit it, or there was other dialogue and they edited it. But either way, bad. Bad Nana. The CW logo actually looks better than anything in the show.
Yeah. All right. All right. So before we move on to our last thing, to kind of detox and be happy, I hope.
Mm-hmm.
I, being that I always do this when I see something that is incredibly bad, I rewrote / pre-wrote Gotham Knights.
Yeah.
And think of it as somewhat like a series Bible, I suppose. Granted, it's only for like the first season. But yeah, I have 26 pages. Granted, most of that is probably for the concept art that I used as a way to like think. Because the major thing that kind of weirded me out is that there are no costumes in this. You know, it's supposed to be a superhero show and stuff. So
Where are the outfits?
yeah. So, and even if like again, if they had gone the like detective show route or the crime drama, I would have been fine if they didn't have the costumes, somewhat. But no, just
Although to be fair, even a good detective show is more stylized than that. Like seriously.
Yeah. So I kind of sought out to create a story. While I did have the constraint of not having the titular Batman character, seeing as that is a kind of thing that is a rule for the CW, so you can't really use.
Yeah, that's the base premise is no more Batman, basically.
Yeah, which I think can work. You just have to put in the effort and be creative about it.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go briefly run over a lot of things here. So I kind of changed up the plot a lot. So it has been, so I'm reading what I wrote here. It's kind of like the plot. So it has been 25 years since Gotham has seen the legendary vigilante Batman active. The city has seen some peace, but now things are beginning to brew and new agents of chaos are rising to destroy the future Gotham has built. So it is up to those inspired by the Dark Knight to protect this city from evil and continue fighting the never-ending battle.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, okay, so the kind of idea I had was like to make it more plausible on why we don't see Batman.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and I will say, like, I did do a list of inspirations here, and like one of them obviously was Batman Beyond.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I did change up the cast a bit as well, as much as I'm sure I will get shit for that, to make this more of like a fan fiction.
Mm-hmm.
But I kept Turner Hayes, and I do want to bring up that character. It's like the OC. Everything I've seen from everything we've seen so far here in the
Mm-hmm.
trailer, is he doesn't really feel like his own unique voice.
Yeah.
He honestly feels like kind of a mixture of Damian Wayne, Jason Todd, and a bit of Dick Grayson, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing really seemingly distinct about him.
He's just the generic Robin stand-in, given that we can't use any of the other significant Robins.
Again, I would be fine if it was an original character. If they made him original, if they made him distinct.
If they actually made him a character with his
Yeah.
own personality and like three-dimensional nature and whatnot.
Yeah, it's not like they haven't done that before. Like Sarah Lance never existed in the comics,
Right.
and she became a really cool character on her own right.
Yeah. Or back in the old DC animated universe days, Harley Quinn. So compelling and interesting that they put her in the comics anyway.
In Superman the animated series, the guy who's the detective, who was based off Jack Kirby.
It's not Bullock. What's his name?
So, someone else. I can't. It's gonna bug me if I don't.
Commence with the Google foo.
I'm Googling. Oh, okay, I was wrong. He was in the comics. That's my bad.
Okay.
I think his look was based off, at the very least, for the show, based off Jack Kirby.
Oh, good for him. Anyway, shall we?
But yeah, well, I was going to mention, I did add a couple characters in here, change them up a bit. I did change Misha Collins to a character known as Dr. Hurt. Granted, that was for an idea for a later season, who led this kind of group called the Black, I believe, Black Glove Society. And it was basically kind of the idea is I guess the overall arcing theme, if you wanted to talk about that for this kind of my version of Gotham Knights was kind of the idea of ultimately legacy and how that could be both good and bad. And what makes a legacy, how individuals perceive a legacy and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just like kind of a very mythic sense of that of legacy, I guess, was kind of what I
Mm-hmm.
wanted for overall.
Mm-hmm.
And to those who are part of our Discord, I will put a PDF of my writing in the next few days, as I am still working on some things.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Anyway, let me set up the next thing. I probably should have done that earlier.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Dragon Trail. I put a link in the description every week.
Yeah. Yeah, the only place that other people aren't allowed in is the host talk, because that's where we discuss things relating to our private stuff. So
Yeah. So moving on to our last thing, which I believe Dawn, you sent me this, right?
yeah, I sent this, I think.
It's the Pinocchio teaser trailer for Disney Plus. I have not seen. I've kept myself from not watching, so I have a very fresh reaction here.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard very little about this. I'll be completely honest.
Honestly, I think I'm more excited about the Guillermo del Toro Pinocchio adaptation for Netflix, but this doesn't look terrible to me. So
You're welcome, Dragon Troll. Anyway, shall we?
when you wish upon a star.
Banana. I will say this: it has like kind of from like the brief shots we've seen so far. It has like a story book, like a storybook kind of style to it.
Yeah. Which I think is the right angle to go with this.
Yeah. So far, I don't really have. I mean, it's a teaser, so I'm actually proud that it is acting like a teaser, because so many trailers are basically just trailers.
Well, yeah, there's that, but there's also, of course, the fact that this is going to go on Disney Plus rather than to the theater, so it's going to be a slightly smaller scale than usual.
Fair enough. Anyway, John.
Yep, banana.
Banana. Robert Zemeckis. Why does the name sound familiar?
Because he's directed and produced a bunch of things.
Like,
I can't think of any off the top of my head,
okay, I'm just.
but it's IMDb.
And Tom Hanks as Geppetto, I'm all for.
Though I kind of wish they had just let him be him rather than the makeup. Because he's old enough now that he can play an old man without the makeup.
No, Forrest Gump, Back to the Future, Castaway, Back to the Future Part 2, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Polar Express, Death Becomes Her. Oh, 2009's Christmas Carol.
Hmm.
Monster
He's
High.
probably the right person to. He's probably the right person to do this, all things considered. Because he can kind of do the family film, but with a darker edge to it, kind of thing.
Yeah. But again, I do like the kind of look of this. And also, Tom Hanks was. I mean, he was cast to play Mr. Rogers in.
Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, yeah, or was it Welcome to the Neighborhood? Something having to do with the neighborhood.
Well, I was going to say like a biographical pick, I think.
Yeah, it was I want to say it was A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, maybe? Was the title of the biopic? Because there were two Mr. Rogers related movies around the same time. There was the one where
one was a documentary, and the other was
Yeah.
the Hanks movie, which was a biopic.
Yeah, there was one that was played. There was one that was the biopic where Tom Hanks played him, and there was just the documentary.
Yeah. And yeah, he's just a really friendly and like warm dude. So I
Yeah.
could totally see him playing Geppetto.
Yeah.
What's funny is I remember watching a video where someone actually casted him as a version of Superman.
I mean, 20 years ago, yeah, I could see it.
No, it was an old version of Superman. And at the very least, his voice, I think, would work.
Anyway, banana.
Starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight. I wish I may, I wish I might have the wish I wish tonight.
So, I'm fully aware that when Disney does these like live action reboots or
Remakes.
Yeah, remakes, they're usually just a shot for shot deal.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm. Yeah, I realize like it's gonna be that basically, but I at least hope there's still gonna be like some flair or something.
Yeah, I think there probably will be. I mean, Robert Zemeckis is good at pulling on the heartstrings, which is kind of what's necessary for this.
Yeah. Anyway, shall we?
Banana.
Banana.
When you wish upon a star.
There's a lot.
Reminds me a little bit of Tim Burton's live action Dumbo from a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's got a lot of whimsy to it, which I really appreciate.
Yeah.
Because usually these
Although, yeah, I do sort of wish that the Blue Fairy gave Jiminy his tuxedo and his intelligence. Because I assumed in a live action version of this that she would be the one that would give him human level intelligence and also his tuxedo. But it sort of looks like he already has him by the time she's coming in. It's a small thing, but it's just that was always my headcanon, that much like the fairy godmother with the turning the mice into horses and stuff, that she would be the one to give Jiminy his intelligence and his tuxedo so that he could act as a conscience for Pinocchio.
Mhm.
Anyway, banana.
I don't know.
Terrence, streaming on Disney Plus.
I have to say, I might be uncharacteristically emotional in this case, but every time I hear the "When You Wish Upon a Star" music, there's a part of me that it still gets to me. God damn it!
Right. I mean, it looks good. You know, I mean, I'm realizing that it's going to be a 1-for-1 remake. I'm probably not going to see it simply because, you know, it's not my type of movie. I was never really a big Pinocchio fan or anything. I'm not even really like a big Disney fan, to be completely honest. So, but I can recognize.
Oddly,
I can recognize quality when I see it. So,
yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Oddly, I'm a bigger Disney fan than he is, which seems somewhat counterintuitive, but yeah.
Anyway, I don't really have anything else to say. So, with that, folks, I don't have anything else. So,
No. Go ahead.
So, with that, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, wiedersehen, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
Fuck off, everyone.